And good morning, everybody. As was promised, after I've done the study with me segment, we're going to go right into the church father reading. We'll be reading the works of Athenagoras, and before we continue on his works, reading it from chapter 1 to 10, we'll have an introductory note to Athenagoras. I think this is just an error from the Bible Hub website. I will be giving out the link to this one so that you guys can check it out yourself, and you could read the rest of the chapters with or without me, and get a head start of yourself. So I'm going to pin the link on that one, which is the work of Athenagoras over here. I'm just gonna pin that, but I can't pin it through the StreamYard tab. So I'm just gonna go over here and pin that. Yeah. So that you guys can take a look at that yourself, and read ahead of me if you like. So let us begin. I wonder if my audio is too bad or under 10. Yeah, I can do that. All right. So introductory note to Athenagoras, rather. Plea for the Christians, Athenagoras. I hope this is zoomed in well enough for you guys, for the benefit of you also watching this. So in AD 177, in placing Athenagoras here, somewhat out of the order usually accepted, I commit no appreciable violence against chronology, and I gain a great advantage for the reader. To some extent, we must recognize in collocation the principles of affinity and historic growth. Closing up the bright succession of the earlier apologists, this favorite author affords also a fitting introduction to the great founder of the Alexandrian school. So this is actually Commodus, Alexandria, who comes next into view. His works opens the way for Clement's elaboration of Justin's claim that the whole of philosophy is embraced in Christianity. It is charming to find the primal fountains of Christian thought uniting here, to flow on forever in the widening and deepening channel of Catholic orthodoxy, as it gathers into itself all human culture and enriches the world with products of regenerated mind, harvested from its overflow into the fields of philosophy and poetry and art and science. By the way, this is translated by Reverend B.P. Pratt. So where were we? All right. More of this when we come to Clement, the man of genius who introduced Christianity to itself, as reflected in the burnished mirror of his intellect. Shackles are falling from the persecuted and imprisoned faculties of the faithful. Soon the faith is to speak out, no more in tones of apology, but as mistress of the human mind in its pilot to new worlds of discovery and broad domains of conquest. All hail the freedom with which, henceforth, Christians are to assume the overthrow of heathenism as a foregone conclusion. The distasteful exposure of heresies was the inevitable task of the first century. It was the chase and following up of the adversary in his limping and cowardly retreat, the scattering of rare of darkness. With Athenagoras, we touch upon tokens of things to come. We see philosophy yoked to the chariot of Messiah. We begin to realize that sibilant surrender of outworn paganism and its forecast of an era of light. Magnus ab integro seclorum nascitor ordo, cui fere primum, disinet octoto surget gens aurea mundo. In Athenagoras, whose very name is a retrospect, we discover a remote result of St. Paul's speech on Mars Hill. That's in Acts 20. I think that's in Acts, not Acts 27, more like Acts 19, I guess. The Jews started an outroar where Paul and Silas was preaching. I gotta give that a look see, because I don't wanna I want to give credence to scripture rightfully. So I guess it's 17. That's 17. Was that 19? Oh, yeah. Paul preaches at Thessalonica. Yeah. So this was at 17. Okay. So, all right. This was Acts 17, ladies and gentlemen, by the way, contains the polemicist, the polemic of Paul towards the Athenians. You can look that up yourself. It's a good read. How he argued against the Athenians and their gods. So, in Athenagoras, whose very name is a retrospect, we discover a remote result of St. Paul's speech on Mars Hill. The apostle had cast his bread upon the waters of Ilissus and Cephissus to find it after many days. When they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some mocked. Here comes a philosopher from the Athenian Agora, a convert to St. Paul's argument in his epistle to the Corinthians, confessing the unknown God, demolishing the marble mob of deities that so stirred the apostle's spirit within him, and teaching alike the Platonist and the Stoic to sit at the feet of Jesus. Dionysius the Areopagite and the woman named Damaris are no longer to be despised as the scanty first fruits of Attica. They too have found a voice in this splendid trophy of the gospel, and being dead, they yet speak through him. To the meager facts of his biography, which appears below, there is nothing to be added, and I shall restrain my disposition to be a commentator within the limits of scanty notations. In the notes to Tatian and Theophilus, I have made the student acquainted with the useful addition to his treatise on Justin Martyr, in which the able and judicious Bishop K harmonizes those authors with Justin. The same harmony enfolds the works of Athenagoras, and thus affords a synopsis of Christian teaching under the Antonines, in which precision of theological language is yet unattained, but identity of faith is clearly exhibited. While the Germans are furnishing the scholar with critical editions of the ancients, invaluable for their patient accumulations of fact and illustration, they are so daring in theory and in conjecture when they come to exposition, that one enjoys the earnest and wholesome tone of sober comment that distinguishes the English theologian. It has the great merit of being inspired by profound sympathy with primitive writers, and unadulterated faith in the Scriptures. Too often a German critic treats one of these venerable witnesses, who yet live and yet speak, as if they were dead subjects on the dissecting table. They cut and carve with anatomical display, and use the microscope with scientific skill. But oh, how frequently they surrender the saints of God as mere corpses, into the hands of those who count them victims of a blind faith in a dead Christ. It will not be necessary, after my quotations from Kay in the foregoing sheets, to do more than indicate similar illustrations of Athenagoras to be found in his pages. The dry version often requires lubrications of devoutly fragrant exegesis, and providentially they are at the hand in the elaborate but modest work, of which even this generation should not be allowed to lose sight. The annotations of Conrad Gesner and Henry Stephans would have greatly enriched this edition, had I been permitted to enlarge the work by adding a version of them. They are often curious and are supplemented by the interesting letter of Stephans to Peter Nanius, the eminent pillar of Louvain, the earliest copies of Athenagoras, from which modern editions have proceeded. The Paris edition of Justin Martyr, 1615, contains these notes, as well as the Greek of Tatian, Theophilus, and Athenagoras, with a Latin rendering. As Bishop K constantly refers to this edition, I have considered myself fortunate in possessing it, using it largely in comparing his learned comments with the Edinburgh version. A few words as to the noble treatise of our author on the resurrection is a firm and loving voice to this keynote of Christian faith. It rings like an anthem through all the variations of his thought and argument. Comparing his own blessed hope with the delusions of a world lying in wickedness, and looking steadfastly to the life of the world to come, What a sublime contrast we find in this figure of Christ's witness to the sensual life of the heathen, and even to the group, and even to the groping wisdom of the Attic sages. I think this treatise as sort of growth from the mind of one who had studied in the academe, pitying yet loving poor Socrates and his disciples. Yet more, it is the outcome of meditation on that sad history in the Acts, which expounds St. Paul's bitter reminiscences, which he says that his gospel was, to the Greeks, foolishness. They never heard him again on this matter. He left them under the confused impressions they had expressed in the Agora, when they said, He seemeth to be a setter forth of new gods. St. Luke allows himself a smile only half suppressed when he adds, Because he preached unto them Jesus and Anastasis, which in their ears was only a barbarian echo to their own Phoebus and Artemis. And what did Athenians want of any more wares of that sort, especially under the introduction of a poor Jew from parts unknown? Did the apostles' prophetic soul foresee Athenagoras as he departed from among them? However that may be, his blessed master knew what he would do. He could let none of Paul's words fall to the ground without taking care that some seeds should bring forth fruit 1,000-fold. Here come the sheaves at last. Athenagoras proves also what our Saviour meant when he said to the Galileans, Ye are the light of the world. The following is the original introductory notice. It is one of the most singular facts in early ecclesiastical history that the name of Athenagoras is scarcely ever mentioned. Only 2 references to him in his writings have been discovered. One of these occurs in the work of Methodius on the resurrection of the body, as preserved by Epiphanius and Photius. The author notice of him is found in the writings of Philip of Side, in Pamphylia, who flourished in the early part of the 5th century. It is very remarkable that Eusebius should have been altogether silent regarding him, and that writings, so elegant and powerful as are those which still exist under his name, should have been allowed in early times to sink into almost entire oblivion. We know with certainty regarding Athenagoras that he was an Athenian philosopher who had embraced Christianity, and that his apology, or, as he styles it, embassy, presbeia, was presented to the Emperors Aurlius and Commodus about AD 177. He is supposed to have written a considerable number of works, but the only other production of his extant is treatise on the resurrection. It is probable that this work was composed somewhat later than the Apology, though his exact date cannot be determined. Philip of Side also states that he preceded Pantaenus as head of the catechetical school at Alexandria. But this is probably incorrect, and is contradicted by Eusebius. A more interesting and perhaps well-rounded statement is made by the same writer respecting Athenagoras, to the effect that he was won over to Christianity while reading the scriptures in order to controvert them. Both his apology and his treatise on the resurrection display a practiced pen and a richly cultured mind. He is by far the most elegant, and certainly at the same time one of the ablest, early Christian apologists. Chapter 1. Injustice shown towards the Christians. In your empire, greatest of sovereigns, different nations have different customs and laws, and no one is hindered by law or fear of punishment from following his ancestral usages, however ridiculous these may be. A citizen of Ilium calls Hector a god and pays divine honors to Helen, taking her for our Adrastia. The Lacedaemonian venerates Agamemnon as Zeus, and Philono, the daughter of Tyndarus, and the man of Tenedos worships Tennis. The Athenians sacrifice to Erechtheus as Poseidon. The Athenians also perform religious rites and celebrate mysteries in honor of Agralius and Pandrosus, women who were deemed guilty of impiety for opening the box. In short, among every nation and people, men offer whatever sacrifices and celebrate whatever mysteries they please. The Egyptians reckoned among their gods even cats and crocodiles and serpents and asps and dogs. And to all these both you and the laws give permission so to act, deeming, on the one hand, that to believe in no God at all is impious and wicked, and on the other, that it is necessary for each man to worship the gods he prefers, in order that through fear of the deity men may be kept from wrongdoing. But why, for do not, like the multitude, be led astray by hearsay? Why is a mere name odious to you? Names are not deserving of hatred. It is the unjust act that calls for penalty and punishment. And accordingly, with admiration of your mildness and gentleness, and your peaceful and benevolent disposition towards every man, individuals live in the possession of equal rights, and the cities, according to their rank, share in equal honor, and the whole empire, under your intelligent sway, enjoys profound peace. But for us who are called Christians, you have not in like manner cared. But although we commit no wrong, nay, as will appear in the sequel of this disclosure, are of all men most piously and righteously disposed towards the deity and towards your government, you allow us to be harassed, plundered, and persecuted, the multitude making war upon us for our name alone. We venture, therefore, to lay a statement of our case before you. You will teem for this discourse that we suffer unjustly, and contrary to all law and reason, and we beseech you to bestow some consideration upon us also, that we may cease at length to be slaughtered at the instigation of false accusers. For the fine imposed by our persecutors does not aim merely at our property, nor their insult at our reputation, but the damage they do us at any other of our greater interests. These we hold in contempt, though to the generality they appear matters of great importance. For we have learned not only not to return blow for blow, nor to go to law with those who plunder and rob us, but to those who smite us on one side of the face to offer the other side also, and to those who take away our coat to give likewise our cloak. But when we have surrendered our property, they plot against our very bodies and souls, pouring upon us wholesale charges of crimes of which we are guiltless even in thought, but which belong to these idle praetors themselves, and to the whole tribe of those who are like them. Chapter 2. Claim to be treated as others are when accused. If, indeed, anyone can convict us of a crime, be it small or great, we do not ask to be excused from punishment, but are prepared to undergo the sharpest and most merciless inflictions. But if the accusation relates merely to our name, and it is undeniable that up to the present time the stories told about us rest on nothing better than the common undiscriminating popular talk, nor has any Christian been convicted of crime, it will devolve on you, illustrious and benevolent and most learned sovereigns, to remove by law this despiteful treatment, so that, as throughout the world both individuals and cities partake of your beneficence, we also may feel grateful to you, exulting that we are no longer the victims of false accusation. For it does not comport with your justice that others, when charged with crimes, should not be punished till they are convicted, but that in our case the name we bear should have more force than the evidence adduced on the trial, when the judges, instead of inquiring whether the person arraigned have committed any crime, vent their insults on the name, as if that were itself a crime. But no name in by itself is reckoned either good or bad. Names appear bad or good according as the actions underlying them are bad or good. You, However, have yourselves a clear knowledge of this, since you are well instructed in philosophy and all learning. For this reason, too, those who are brought before you for trial, though they may be arraigned on the gravest charges, have no fear, because they know that you will inquire respecting their previous life, and not be influenced by names if they mean nothing, nor by the charges contained in the indictments if they should be false. They accept with equal satisfaction, as regards its fairness, the sentence whether of condemnation or acquittal. What, therefore, is conceded as the common right of all? We claim for ourselves that we shall not be hated and punished because we are called Christians, for what has that name to do with our being bad men? But be tried on any charges which may be brought against us, neither be released on our disproving them, or punished if convicted of crime, nor for the name, for no Christian is a bad man unless he falsely professes our doctrines, but for the wrong which has been done. It is thus that we see the philosophers judged. None of them before trial is deemed by the judge either good or bad on account of his science or art, but if found guilty of wickedness, he is punished, without thereby affixing any stigma in philosophy. Whereas a bad man for not cultivating philosophy in a lawful manner, but science is blameless. While if he refutes the false charges, he is acquitted. Let this equal justice then be done to us. Let the life of the accused persons be investigated, but let the name stand free from all imputation. I must at the outset of my defense entreat you, illustrious emperors, to listen to me impartially, not to be carried away by the common irrational talk and prejudge the case, to apply your desire of knowledge and love of truth to the examination of our doctrine also. Thus, while you on your part will not err through ignorance, we also, by disproving the charges arising out of the undiscerning rumor of that multitude, shall cease to be assailed. Chapter 3. Charges brought against the Christians. Three things are alleged against us: atheism, Fiestian feasts, Oedipodian intercourse. But if these charges are true, spare no class. Proceed at once against our crimes. Destroy us, root and branch, with our wives and children. If any Christian is found, I'm so sorry. If any Christian is found to live like the brutes, and yet even the brutes do not touch the flesh of their own kind, and they pair by a law of nature. Oh my goodness, give me a second. Okay. And yet even the brutes do not touch the flesh of their own kind, and they pair by a law of nature. And only at the regular season, not for simple wantonness, they also recognize those from whom they receive benefits. If anyone, therefore, is more savage than the brutes, what punishment that he can endure shall be deemed adequate to such offences. But if these things are only idle tales and empty slanders, originating in the fact that virtue is opposed by its very nature to vice, and that contraries war against one another by a divine law, you are yourselves witnesses that no such iniquities are committed by us, for you forbid informations to be laid against us. It remains for you to make inquiry concerning our life, our opinions, our loyalty and obedience to you and your house and government, and thus at length to grant to us the same rights. We ask nothing more as to those who persecute us. For we shall then conquer them, unhesitatingly surrendering, as we now do, our very lives for the truth's sake. Chapter 4. The Christians are not atheists, but acknowledge one only God. As regards, first of all, the allegation that we are atheists, for I will meet the charges one by one, that we may not be ridiculed for having no answer to give to those who make them. With reason did the Athenians adjudge Athenagoras guilty of atheism, in that he not only divulged the Orphic doctrine, and published the mysteries of Eleusis and of the Cabiri, and chopped up the wooden statue of Hercules to boil his turnips, but openly declared that there was no God at all. But to us, who distinguish God from matter, and teach that matter is one thing and God another, and that they are separated by a wide interval, for the deity is uncreated and eternal, to be beheld by the understanding and reason alone, while matter is created and perishable. Is it not absurd to apply the name of atheism? If our sentiments were like those of Diagoras, while we have such incentives to piety, in the established order, the universal harmony, the magnitude, the color, the form, the arrangement of the world, with reason might our reputation for impiety, as well as the cause of our being thus harassed, be charged on ourselves. But since our doctrine acknowledges one God, the maker of this universe, who is himself uncreated for that which does not come to be, but that which is not, but has made all things by the Logos, which is from him, we are treated unreasonably in both respects, that we are both defamed and persecuted. Chapter 5. Testimony of the Poets to the Unity of God. Poets and philosophers have not been voted atheists for inquiring concerning God. Euripides speaking of those who, according to popular preconception, are ignorantly called gods, says, doubtingly, if Zeus indeed does reign in heaven above, he ought not on the righteous ills descend. But speaking of him who was apprehended by the understanding as matter of certain knowledge, he gives his opinion decidedly, and with intelligence thus: seest thou on high him who, with humid arms, clasps both the boundless ether and the earth? Him reckon Zeus, and him record as God. For as to these so-called gods, he never saw any real existences, to which a name is usually assigned, underlying them Zeus, for instance, who Zeus is I know not but by report, nor that any names were given to realities, which actually do exist, for of what use are names to those who have no real existences underlying them? But him he did see by means of his works, considering with an eye to things unseen, the things which are manifest in air, in ether, on earth. Him therefore, from whom proceed all created things, and by whose spirit they are governed, he concluded to be God, and Sophocles agrees with him when he says, there is one God, in truth there is but one, who made the heavens and the broad earth beneath. Euripides speaking of the nature of God which fills his works with beauty, and teaching both where God must be and that he must be one. Chapter 6. Opinions of the philosophers as to the one God. Philolaus, too, when he says that all things are included in God as in a stronghold, teaches that he is one, and that he is superior to matter. Lysis and Opsimus thus define God, that one says that he is an ineffable number, the other that he is the excess of the greatest number beyond that which comes nearest to it. So that since 10 is the greatest number according to the Pythagoreans, being the Tractus, and containing all the arithmetic and harmonic principles, and the 9 stands next to it, God is a unit, that is, one. But the greatest number exceeds the next least by one. Then there are Plato and Aristotle. Not that I am about to go through all that the philosophers have said about God, as if I wished to exhibit a complete summary of their opinions. For I know that, as you excel all men in intelligence and in the power of your rule, in the same proportion do you surpass them all in an accurate acquaintance with all learning, cultivating as you do each several branch with more success than even those who have devoted themselves exclusively to any one. But, inasmuch as it is impossible to demonstrate without the citation of names that we are not alone in confining the notion of God to unity, I have ventured on an enumeration of opinions. Excuse me. Where was I? Okay. Plato then says, to find out the maker and father of this universe is difficult, and when found, it is impossible to declare him to all, conceiving of one uncreated and eternal God. And if he recognizes others as well, such as the sun, moon, and stars, yet he recognizes them as created gods, offspring of gods, of whom I am the maker, and the father of works which are indissoluble apart from my will. But whatever is compounded can be dissolved. If, therefore, Plato is not an atheist for conceiving of one uncreated God, the framer of the universe, neither are we atheists, who acknowledge and firmly hold that he is God, who has framed all things by the Logos, and holds them in being by his Spirit. Aristotle again and his followers, recognizing the existence of one whom they regard as a sort of compound living creature, zoon, speak of God as consisting of soul and body, thinking his body to be the ethereal space of the planetary stars, and the sphere of the fixed stars, moving in circles. But his soul, the reason which presides over the motion of the body, itself not subject to motion, but becoming the cause of motion to the other. The Stoics also, although by the appellations they employed to suit the changes of matter, which they say is permeated by the Spirit of God, they multiply the deity in name, and in reality they consider God to be one. For if God is an artistic fire advancing methodically to the production of the several things of the world, embracing in himself all the seminal principles by which each thing is produced in accordance fate, with fate, and if his spirit pervades the whole world, then God is one according to them, being named Zeus in respect of the fervid part to Zaon of matter, and Hera in respect of the air, Hoer, and called by other names in respect of that particular part of matter which he pervades. Chapter 7. Superiority of the Christian doctrine respecting God. Since, therefore, the unity of the deity is confessed by almost all, even against their will, when they come to treat of the first principles of the universe, and we in our turn likewise assert that he who arranged this universe is God, why is it that they can say and write with impunity what they please concerning the deity, but that against us as a law lies in force, though we are able to demonstrate what we apprehend and justly believe, namely that there is one God, with proofs and reason according with truth? For poets and philosophers, as to other subjects, so also to this, have applied themselves in the way of conjecture, moved by reason of their affinity with the afflatus from God, each one by his own soul, to try whether he could find out and apprehend the truth. But they have not been found competent fully to apprehend it, because they thought fit to learn, not from God concerning God, but each one from himself. Hence they came each to his own conclusion respecting God, matter, and forms in the world. But we have for witnesses of the things we apprehend and believe, prophets, men who have pronounced concerning God and things of God, guided with the Spirit of God. And you too will admit, excelling all others as you do in intelligence and in piety towards the true God, to ontostheion, that it would be irrational for us to cease to believe in the Spirit from God, who moved the mouths of the prophets like musical instruments, and to give heed to mere human opinions. Chapter 8. Absurdities of Polytheism. As regards, then, the doctrine that there was from the beginning of one God, the maker of this universe, consider it in this wise, that you may be acquainted with the argumentative grounds also of our faith. If there were from the beginning two or more gods, they were either in one and the same place, or each of them separately in his own. In one and the same place they could not be. For if they are gods, they are not alike. Because they are uncreated, they are unlike. For created things are like their patents, but the uncreated are unlike, being neither produced from anyone nor formed after the pattern of anyone. Hand and eye and foot are parts of one body, making up together one man. Is God in this sense one? And indeed, Socrates was compounded and divided into parts, just because he was created imperishable. But God is uncreated and impassible and indivisible, does not therefore consist of parts. But if, on the contrary, each of them exists separately, since he that made the world is above the things created and above the things he has made and set in order, where can the other or the rest be? For if the world, being made spherical, is confined within the circles of heaven, and the creator of the world is above the things created, managing that by his providential care of these, what place is there for the second God, or for the other gods? For he is not in the world, because it belongs to the other, nor about the world, for God the maker of the world is above it. But if he is neither in the world, nor about the world, for all that surrounds it is occupied by this one, where is he? Is he above the world and the first God, in another world, or about another? But if he is in another or about another, then he is not about us, for he does not govern the world, nor is his power great, for he exists in a circumscribed space. But if he is neither in another world, for all things are filled by the other, nor about another, for all things are occupied by the other, he clearly does not exist at all, for there is no place in which that can be. Or what does he do, seeing there is another to whom the world belongs, and he is able the sorry, and he is above the maker of the world, and yet is another in the world, nor about the world. Is there, then, some other place where he can stand? But God and what belongs to God are above him, and what, too, shall be the place, seeing that the other fills the regions which are above the world? Perhaps he exerts a providential care? By no means. And yet, unless he does so, he has done nothing. If then he neither does anything nor exercises providential care, and if there is not another place in which he is, then this being of whom we speak is the one God from the beginning, the sole maker of the world. Chapter 9. The Testimony of the Prophets. If we satisfied ourselves with advancing such considerations as these, our doctrines might be looked upon as human. But, since the voices of the prophets confirm our arguments, for I think that you also, with your great zeal for knowledge, and your great attainments in learning, cannot be ignorant of the writings either of Moses or of Isaiah and Jeremiah, and the other prophets, who, lifted in ecstasy above the natural operations of their minds by the impulses of the divine Spirit, utter the things with which they were inspired, the Spirit making use of them as a flute player breathes into a flute. What, then, do these men say? The Lord is our God, no other can be compared with him. And again, I am God, the first and the last, and besides me there is no God. In like manner, before me there was no other God, and after me there shall be none. I am God, and there is none besides me. And as to his greatness, heaven is my throne, and the earth is the footstool of my feet. What house will ye build for me? What is the place of my rest? But I leave it to you, when you meet with the books themselves, to examine carefully the prophecies contained in them, that you may on fitting grounds defend us from the abuse cast upon us. Finally, chapter 10. The Christians worship the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. That we are not atheists, therefore, seeing that we acknowledge one God, uncreated, eternal, invisible, impassible, incomprehensible, illimitable, who is apprehended by the understanding only and the reason, who is encompassed by light and beauty and spirit and power ineffable, by whom the universe has been created through his logos, set in order, and is kept in being. I have sufficiently demonstrated, I say his logos, for we acknowledge also a Son of God, nor let anyone think it ridiculous that God should have a son. For though the poets in their fictions represent the gods as no better than men, our mode of thinking is not the same as theirs, concerning either God the Father or the Son. But the Son of God is the Logos of the Father, in idea and in operation, for after the pattern of him and by him were all things made. The Father and the Son being one, the Son being in the Father and the Son, in oneness and power of spirit, the understanding and reason, known as Kai Logos, of the Father as the Son of God. But if, in your surpassing intelligence, it occurs to you to inquire what is meant by the Son, I will state briefly that he is the first product of the Father, not as having been brought into existence, for from the beginning God, whose eternal mind knows, had the Logos in himself, being from eternity instinct with Logos or Logikos. But inasmuch as he came forth to be the idea and energizing power of all material things, which lay like nature without attributes in an inactive earth, the grosser particles being mixed up with the lighter, the prophetic spirit also agrees with our statements. The Lord, it says, made me the beginning of his ways to his works. The Holy Spirit himself also, which operates in the prophets, we assert to be an effluence of God, flowing from him and returning back again like a beam of the sun. Who then would not be astonished to hear men who speak of God the Father, and of God the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, and who declare both their power in union and their distinction in order, called atheists? Nor is our teaching in what relates to the divine nature confined to these points, but we recognize also as multitude of angels and ministers, whom God the Maker and Framer of the world distributed and appointed to their several posts by his Logos, to occupy themselves about the elements, and the heavens, and the world, and the things in it, goodly ordering of them all. And that concludes today's reading. So, to end this session, do not take your salvation for granted, and take your sanctification seriously. My name is Saint Samurai the Dim, and I'm signing up. 3, 2,